There it is again. That gray, brittle little lavender in the corner, the one you watered every few days, fed, fussed over, tucked into your richest, blackest soil. And it thanked you by turning the color of ash. So you tell yourself you just don't have the touch. Stop right there, because that story isn't true. You didn't neglect this plant. You loved it to death. Lavender wants poor, gritty soil and long stretches of being ignored, and every kind thing you did was quietly killing it. Grow it on neglect, and it finally thrives. Let me be square with you from the start, because this audience does not have patience for tall tales. I am not going to tell you to plant a lavender and never touch it again. A brand new lavender, fresh in the ground, needs your attention for one season while it grows roots. That part matters, and we will get to it. But once it has settled in, everything you were taught about being a good gardener turns into the exact thing that rots the plant from the bottom up. The rich soil, the steady watering, the handful of fertilizer, the constant fussing. All of it kindness. All of it poison. And every dead lavender you have ever mourned was almost certainly killed by care, not carelessness. There are 7 rules here, and I am going to be honest with you now, so it saves you heartache later. 2 of these 7 fix almost every dead lavender I have ever seen. If you do nothing else, do those 2. I will point them out plainly when we reach them. So stay with me, because getting those 2 right is the difference between a shrub that lives 15 years and one you replace every spring, throwing good money after a plant that never had a chance. If you like growing things that survive real life, instead of demanding constant babysitting, you are in the right place, because that is exactly the kind of gardening this channel is built on. Rule 1. Give it poor, lean, gritty soil, not rich compost. This is your instinct working against you. You dug a nice hole, you filled it with the darkest, richest compost you had, and you told yourself you were giving the plant the best possible start. For a tomato, you would be right. For lavender, you just built it a swamp. Lavender comes from the dry, rocky hillsides of the Mediterranean, where the soil is thin and stony and drains the second the rains stop. Rich soil holds water around the roots, and lavender roots that sit in moisture rot. As the team at Epic Gardening explains, soggy, heavy soil is one of the most common reasons lavender dies. So do not feed it your best dirt. Give it your worst. Think of it like a cactus you happen to love the smell of. You would never plant a cactus in wet compost, and lavender wants the same lean, hungry ground. If your soil is heavy clay, cut it hard with coarse sand and small gravel until it feels gritty in your hand, not smooth and sticky. A rough measure I use is about 1 part grit to 1 part existing soil for stubborn clay, and more than that if the ground still feels like modeling clay a day after rain. There is one more thing lavender prefers, and that is a soil on the sweet, slightly alkaline side. If you know your ground runs acidic, a small handful of garden lime worked in around the planting hole nudges it in the right direction. That grit and that little bit of sweetness are the whole point. Rule 2. Plant it in full, blazing sun. This is one of the 2 rules that matter most. Lavender needs at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun a day, and honestly, the more the better. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, a spot with full sun is not a suggestion for lavender, it is a requirement. That tired plant tucked into a shady corner where you thought it looked pretty was never going to make it. Because shade keeps the leaves damp and the soil cold, and cold damp is where fungus and rot get to work. Sun does 2 jobs at once. It dries the plant off after rain, and it pushes the plant to make those fragrant oils that are the whole reason you grew it. A lavender in shade is like bread dough left in a cold kitchen. It just sits there, pale and sulking, never rising into what it was meant to be. Put it against a south-facing wall or fence if you can, somewhere the sun bakes and the heat bounces back through the afternoon. That reflected warmth is a gift, and it is exactly the kind of hot, dry pocket that mimics the hillside this plant came from. Give it that bright spot, and you have solved half of the whole puzzle. The other half is what is sitting under the plant, in the soil and its drainage. Rule 3. Give it sharp drainage. This is the one that saves the most plants. If you remember nothing else from this whole video, remember this. Lavender does not die of thirst. It drowns. Water that cannot escape sits around the roots, and the roots suffocate and rot, and by the time the top of the plant turns gray and crispy, the damage below is already done. The folks at Blooming Backyard point straight at poor drainage as a leading cause of lavender collapse. So your job is to make sure water runs through and away fast. The simplest fix is to plant on a mound or a raised bed so gravity pulls the water down and out. Then top the soil around the base with a couple of inches of gravel or coarse grit instead of the soft bark mulch you would use everywhere else. That gravel mulch keeps the crown of the plant dry, reflects heat up into it, and stops water from pooling against the stem where rot always begins. Picture a plate tilted in the sink so the water runs off instead of sitting in a puddle. That is all you are doing for the roots, tilting the whole situation so nothing ever pools. Get the drainage right, and you have now handled both of the two rules that fix nearly every failure. Everything after this is about not undoing your good work. Rule 4. Water deeply but rarely, and once it is established, mostly stop. This is the rule where love does the killing. You walk past, the top looks a little dry, you give it a splash. Then again 2 days later. You are being attentive, and you are drowning it one small kindness at a time. Here is the honest, careful truth, and I want to be precise, because this is where people go wrong in both directions. A brand new lavender, in its first season, does need regular water to grow roots. Water it about once a week that first summer, a good deep soak that reaches down and encourages the roots to chase the moisture downward instead of loafing near the surface. But once it is established, usually after that first full season, you back off hard. A settled lavender wants a deep drink only when the soil has gone properly dry, and in many climates the rain alone will handle it entirely. Deep and rare beats shallow, and often every single time, because deep watering sends roots down where the soil stays stable and cool, while frequent little sips keep the roots lazy and shallow and wet. Think of how you water a tree, not how you water a fern. And when you do water, aim at the base and the soil, never over the leaves, because wet foliage sitting overnight is an open invitation to fungus. If you are ever unsure whether to water, the plant will forgive you for waiting far more readily than it will forgive you for another drink. If lavender has beaten you before, this is the one worth saving, so take a second to subscribe. This channel is all about growing beautiful things the cheap, low-effort way. Rule 5. Never fertilize it. I know how this sounds. Everything else in your garden wants feeding, so it feels wrong, almost neglectful, to leave one plant hungry. But lavender is not like everything else. Feed it, and you get a big, soft, floppy green plant with hardly any flowers and almost no scent. The nitrogen in fertilizer pushes leafy growth at the direct expense of the blooms and the oils you actually wanted. Rich living, poor lavender. That is the rule. The plants come from ground so lean that a handful of fertilizer would seem like a feast, and in that leanness is where all the fragrance lives. If your soil is truly dead and lifeless, a single light scattering of compost once in early spring is the very most it ever needs, and even that is optional. Skip the liquid feeds, skip the granules, skip the tomato food you have sitting in the shed. Think of it like a good olive tree. It fruits best when it is a little stressed and a little hungry, not when it is pampered and coddled with everything it could ask for. Keep the feeding to almost nothing and let the plant stay a bit tough. That toughness is the whole personality of the thing, and it is where the color and the smell come from. Staying tough over the years takes one more habit though, and that is a yearly haircut. Rule 6. Prune it hard once a year so it never turns woody. An unpruned lavender does not die so much as it slowly falls apart. The center opens up, the base turns to bare gray wood, and the whole plant sprawls into a hollow, ugly shape that never really recovers. That is not old age. That is a missed haircut. Lavender needs one firm pruning a year to stay tight, rounded, and full, and the timing is simple. Right after it finishes blooming, or in early spring before the new growth pushes, you cut it back by about a third. Here is the one hard limit you must respect. Do not cut down into the old bare wood at the very bottom, because lavender struggles to sprout fresh growth from that woody base, and a stem cut back to bare wood often simply dies. Stay up in the green, leave a little green on every stem you trim, and shape the whole plant into a neat mound, like a green cushion. Think of it like pruning a rose or shaping a small hedge. You are not hurting it, you are telling it to stay compact and keep flowering, instead of stretching out and giving up. The bonus is a good armful of fragrant stems to dry indoors every time you cut. A yearly trim like this is the difference between a plant that looks good for a decade and one that turns to gray sticks in 3 summers. The last rule decides whether your lavender survives the winter. Rule 7. Pick the right variety for your zone. You can do all 6 of the other rules perfectly and still lose your lavender to a hard winter if you planted the wrong kind. This is the mistake nobody tells beginners about, and it is the reason a lot of people quietly give up on lavender altogether. Not all lavender is equally tough, and the difference is enormous. English lavender, the classic Lavandula angustifolia, is the hardy one, surviving cold down to around zone 5, which means for most of the colder parts of the country, it is the only lavender that will live outside all year. According to Monrovia, English types are the reliable choice for cold climate gardeners, so if you are unsure, start there, and you will rarely go wrong. French and Spanish lavender are a different story. They are more tender, generally happy only in the milder zones 7 through 9, and in a cold winter garden, they will die when the frost sets in, no matter how well you treated them all summer. They tend to have those showier, frilly flower heads that catch your eye at the garden center, which is exactly why so many cold climate gardeners buy them by accident and lose them by February. If you love those Spanish types and you live somewhere cold, grow them in a pot and bring them indoors for the winter and treat them as a summer guest rather than a permanent resident. Which brings up the container question a lot of you are already thinking about. Lavender grows beautifully in a pot, and the pot solves your drainage problem in one clean move. Use a gritty, fast-draining mix, the kind you would use for cactus or succulents. Make sure there is a real hole in the bottom, and never let the pot sit in a saucer of standing water, because that saucer turns into the swamp all over again. Choose a pot that breathes, like terracotta, over solid plastic if you can, since the clay wicks moisture from the roots. A pot on a sunny step, up off the cold ground, is often the easiest way of all to keep a lavender happy, because you control everything it hates, and you can simply move it out of the rain when the weather turns against you. So there are your 7 rules. And I know 7 can feel like a lot to hold in your head at once, so let me make this simple, the way I would if you were standing in my garden, asking where to begin. Do not try to fix everything at once. Pick the 2 that matter most and do those first. Get the drainage sharp gravel or a raised mound so the water runs away, and get the plant into full baking sun. Those 2 alone save more lavenders than the other 5 combined. Once those are handled, the rest is mostly a matter of leaving the plant alone and cutting it back once a year. Picture it next summer. A tidy silver-green mound in the hottest, poorest corner of your yard, throwing up spikes of purple that hum with bees from morning to evening, filling the warm air with that scent every time you brush past. You did not baby it. You barely touched it. You just stopped doing the very things you thought made you a good gardener, and the plant finally got to be what it always was, a tough little survivor from a dry, sunny hillside that asks for almost nothing and gives back for years. That gray, brittle failure in the corner was never a sign you lacked the touch. It was just a plant asking, in the only way it could, to be left alone in the sun. If you want more ways to grow beautiful things that thrive on less, not more, there are plenty of videos just like this one, waiting for you here on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.